Welcome to our behind the screens for session 9 of our Relics of the Ancients campaign. I appreciate you joining me, except if you're one of my players, stop watching. Everybody else, let's get rolling.
Okay, so this was really the culminating battle, so to speak, with the Shadow Seekers, right? And we were able to get to this pretty quickly, as you'll remember from session 8, by the scrying activity that they did as a group, and after getting through that sort of ritual that they worked through together with pulling together all of their insight and their knowledge about what was going on in order to really hone in on where they were. So with the help of Dean Spiros Alexandrin and the Athenaeum, they were able to find the exact location. They had a teleportation circle set up. They were teleporting there, and then they had a plan to get back after they dealt with the issue. So what I did here was I had some last minute preparations that I let them sort of go through whatever they needed to. For the most part, they were ready to go. We had a quick description of what that teleportation circle looked like and sort of just making it feel hopefully a little bit more real to them, that this was a means of conveyance from one place to another that was established within the Athenaeum, so it felt a little bit more secure to them. Hopefully that worked. They then found themselves into this first encounter, and I'm going to be taking notes as I go instead of having them prepared ahead of time, because I want you to know how I'm reacting to some of this as we go. So they're trying to find the Shadow Seekers. They were trying to stop them, and then really they're going to have sort of... Ooh, here we go. Yes. So what are they... What's the challenge to that goal? Well, Zrisha and her Shadow Seekers, right? But what they also are going to find out is that it's the orb of each one of the remaining houses that have been found. The orb of House Sensalis, the orb of House Roshani, and the orb of House Medeiros, which is where they're actually going, is to a Medeiros stronghold. So these are tied to the house sort of responsibilities that have been passed down. So Sensalis was crafting, Roshani is nature, and Medeiros is protection. That will come into play in a little bit. What else is stopping them or preventing them? Well, that's Drayan and the shadows guarding the ritual. And then the effects of the orb, which we'll see a little bit later, although we won't see all of them. What's the possible outcome? Well, they could have defeated everybody, which they actually did. They could have defeated some of them. They could have ruined the ritual. They also did. Some combination of above, and they could have also failed. So I wanted to make sure that I was thinking that through. I would say I'm going to not take the note on the encounter notes for now, because really this was more of a session note than encounter note. So what I did was I borrowed from the Essentials kit in D&D, and I used the map that was there. I just reskinned all the rooms to make it how I'd like, and this was the Dwarven ruins, I believe, that one of the adventures that you can go through in the Essentials kit. I changed what was there and what was around, and it fit well with the similar structure. Here's an interesting thing. One of my players, Crystal, said, "Oh, when I was mapping out the first Ren Temple that we went to, it looked like the same layout as the map that the Athenaeum provided. So it makes sense that these are very related and that they're designed by the same people, same type of architecture." And I was like, oh, yeah, that was completely on purpose in my mind, because it was not. And I actually built the first map, and I guess in the back of my head, maybe I was remembering the layout of the Essentials kit map that was there, and used that in my mind when I was creating it. But it was complete accident, and I just ran with it and said, oh, okay. So that let me, when I was planning this, to really hone in on, this seems familiar, it seems like the ruins that you saw before, the architecture seems right, the designs on the wall, all that stuff. I really leaned into that to make it feel as if not only they were right, but I wanted Crystal as a player to feel as if she really discovered something, which she did. I was intending that anyway, but the fact that she saw the layout and assumed that was sort of happy accident, and so I went with it. So while they were going through, one of the things that I noticed was, I think there was a little bit of a player disagreement in the plan of attack, although I will leave it to say that this is by design of their characters. I think they were just playing their characters really well. So you have Alora, who is someone that wants to be able to work in the shadows, use ranged attacks, be sneaky, right? I mean, she's a Gloomstalker Ranger. That's where she lives, and being able to do that is, great. On the other side, you have her sister-like best friend or adopted sister in Riva wanting to do that as well, just because she wants to be cautious as they're going through. Henrik, on the other hand, one of his personality traits is just being fearless and, smiling in the face of danger, but also he's very contemplative. So I don't think he's rushing in from a perspective of, I'm just going to throw the caution to the wind and just go in. He really wants to figure this stuff out, and so he's a little bit more straightforward to the point. Even in the way that he used his familiar, Bryn, to fly, it wasn't sort of a circumspect route. He wasn't using his familiar tactically. It was really just, I'm trying to find out what's there. Okay, I'm going to go. And direct path. Because of that, he sort of triggered, because they all had this boon, right? They had this this stealth bonus from the Pass Without Trace that Riva cast. And so everybody rolled really high. Gentry, my sniper, was not really seeing them, except for when Henrik went to the filled-in well. And once he did that, he was sort of out in the open, and that kind of made it easier for Gentry to see him. So because Gentry saw him, I had planned before, as you can see here, the first real quote-unquote encounter or scene was a warning shot. And so Gentry, who is sort of a guild coalition agent / gunslinger, fires the warning shot. He was only going to fight them if they wanted to engage, and because he's really there on a job. I've said this before, but guild coalition agents, think of them as hired guns, but also sort of my analog of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. So, and sort of the historical Old West version of that, right? So, even though we're in a fantasy world, that's really what his charge is. He's part of this organization that gets hired to do something. All he was hired to do was to stop them from going in, delay them. That's it. He wasn't hired to do much other than to protect the entrance. The shields were already up, so to speak, and we find that as we go to the entrance. But his goal is just to stall them. So, it wasn't, he would fight until he takes, at least 30 points of damage, and then he's going to say, no, I'll surrender, and I'll give up what you need to do to get in, because I want to move on to another job. I don't want to die over this. This is just a hired gun situation, right? So, but he's not going to give him any more information than that. So, it's sort of a code of honor thing. Well, it worked out that they got him, and he went down under some really good rolls, and Temper, who is their sidekick character that's going along with them, Warforged defender type warrior class, took him out. Here's where I made a mistake, and in the game, if you were watching, you probably noticed this right off the bat. I didn't remember that they get to choose, if they drop somebody to 0, they get to choose whether or not they were intending to knock him out or kill him. One thing that I was right about, because this is just something I do in my campaign, I don't do death saves or any of those things that the heroes get for my NPCs or monsters. I think the mechanic doesn't work as well. I think it's more cinematic, and the reason that the death saves are there is to really give the players another chance to keep going with their character, right? That's what I believe. Take it as you will and adjust that as needed. But what I didn't do was remind them, you could have dropped him down to 0, or I didn't give him enough heads up about that. So in between sessions, in between that session and the session that we're going to have to wrap up the campaign, I did let them know, and I might retroactively say, if that's what they want, if they wanted to just drop him down to 0 and knock him out, then I will say he was knocked out, and the whole time, right? Because it doesn't really change anything that happened after that. If they just knocked him out and left him there, he was knocked out. He wasn't getting back up. So that's where I'm going to go with that. So anyway, so they went in, they figured out the entrance through the sort of puzzle that was there. Not so hard of a puzzle to figure out, but I wanted to slow them down a little bit on their entry, and to make it sort of a cool thing for them to figure out. They did. They got in. And then, as they go through, they realize, oh, this really looked much like the first Ren Temple that we went to. Then it's the encounter with both some Shadow Guardians and Drayan. Drayan's going to fight to the death. The Shadow Guardians are going to basically be there until something happens to them. Everybody rolled really well. So this battle was much easier than I thought it was going to be, but that's fine. One of the things that was happening is that at the top of the round, I was rolling for the orb effects. So as Zrisha is completing her ritual, or trying to complete her ritual, each one of these orbs get triggered at the top of the round. It's completely random. I have somebody roll for it. I don't even roll for it. I have them roll for it, and they don't know what they're rolling for, so it kind of builds a little suspense. And it just so happened that each time that this triggered, it was the House Medeiros. So they got a boon every time. So they got protection, it randomly hit, and I just let it go the way it rolled. I wanted it to be random for them, and they were rolling it, so that's what it was. Could have been that they had an Eldritch Cannon flamethrower, based sort of on what the Artificer class can do, that attacks. It could have been that there was sort of a entangle spell that went out from the nature orb. So I had these sort of built and flavored based on which house the orb belonged to, right? So, but they were lucky and didn't go through what they needed to do, and they also did much more damage than I thought they were going to do to the Zrisha. And so as she tries to leave, they were able to follow her. I had to speed things up a little bit because we were going way over time. That's not normally an issue when it comes to D&D games, right? Like if you're sitting at a table, you can keep things going. But I really thought they needed to at least complete this part because I wanted them, if they were going to beat Zrisha, I wanted them to be able to get to that last room. So they did. Through defeating Zrisha, she yells at them. She says, "What are you doing? You don't understand things." She throws in the fact that there is someone else that she probably is going to be working for. That she lets them know the problem that they're going to face, whether they make it out of there or not. And they beat her. What they find there is, they don't know this yet, but it's a Donran traveling cloak, which is a cloak that will shift in appearance. It's basically will change to look like whatever you need it to change to. It also offers a +1. So it's a cloak of protection, but it's also a cloak that will change its appearance based on whatever you need it to look like. So different area, different fashion, you can change that. Escaping from somewhere, change what the cloak looks like to look a little different. There's also an amulet of health. And again, they don't know all this because they haven't identified all these. And then they also found an Ion Stone, which it's the Ion Stone of Reserve, which lets them store up to 3 spell levels. And right now they have Comprehend Languages, and Dark Vision is already stored in it. But once that is used, those spells are used, then a spellcaster can store up to 3 spell levels in that Ion Stone for use later without having to expend another spell slot. So good stuff. I think that the emotional reaction to this, because they also found a letter, which you guys saw, a parent letter that was almost burned in the dream that Riva had. So they're a little bit confused by the letter, but I think they're a little relieved that they were able to get rid of Zrisha and the Shadow Seekers and recover the orbs, right? So their goal is then to take those back to Ventia for safekeeping, and I think that that's sort of what they were hoping to do. So I think it went fairly well. The players seemed a little disconnected at the beginning, like I mentioned before, and Riva and Allura wanted to go in stealthily. Hendrik wanted to move in quickly. Those are things that maybe were just tied to their personal personality traits that they have. So overall, I think it went well. We're going to start a little differently. So when I said I was going to bring in some notes, so I'm just going to give you a high level recap. I'll write that later. Then they're going to have an encounter coming up in session 10. The first thing we're starting with, and this is the only thing I can control because the rest of these are going to happen depending on what they do next. I told them that we were going to pick up at the moment they left off, so they're still in the ruins. And so what's going to happen is reinforcements are going to arrive. Like the Donren Temple at the beginning of it, before you come in, that's when reinforcements are going to arrive, and they're going to arrive almost in a way that like circle opens and people spill out. Think Avengers Endgame, where like Doctor Strange portal opens up and people start coming through, right? So this is something that I think will be kind of confusing. It's like, wait a minute, we already took care of things. But what's triggering this is that all three of these orbs were being activated and used at the same time. It set off alarm bells at the Athenaeum. Spiros and several others decided we can't let them try to handle this on their own. Something bigger is happening, and they then transport there with some reinforcements, and we'll see what those look like when we get there. Not really a challenge to it, but it's more of a, hey, why did you guys show up at all? Reveals a little bit more about what's going on with the orbs. And they don't have to then travel all the way into the city of Phaestar to travel back. They'll be heading back with them. So it gets them to the Athenaeum a little quicker, which is good. When they get there, a couple things are going to happen. There's going to be some type of reward situation at the Athenaeum for all the hard work that they did. There's likely going to be an offer for them to join the Athenaeum Preservation Society officially and become people that are going on these excavations through assignments, right? So smaller type digs to find things, or whatever's needed, but officially they would be working for them and doing assignments on a case-by-case basis, hopefully not as big as what's going on here. And then the other thing is they're gonna have to at some point talk to High General Oros Vanamir, which is uncle of Alora. And I think this is where most of their questions are going to be sort of answered, but probably not all of them. So stick with the game, because I don't want to reveal too much on this, just in case my players go back and watch these. Because if I say too much here, anything that I reveal in future sessions will kind of be ruined. The one thing I will say is, I'm going to reveal a bunch. It's no fun to have an entire campaign where you don't feel like you're getting any answers. But there is likely one main thing that will not get revealed that I'm not going to mention, but stick with me for other Relics of the Ancients, or if we're into another campaign at that point, which I think we will be actually, we'll see how it goes in my next one, because that'll be the recap. So maybe I'll be able to reveal some of that in the behind the screen. So we will see how it goes.
All right, there you have it. That's what I did to plan for and kind of go along with the flow during our last session, and hopefully it'll bring us to a good conclusion for at least this arc of the story. I do think that the players are going to want to continue with these characters, which is absolutely normal. If they don't, we'll do something new and we'll create a new campaign that is sort of developed by the backgrounds of whatever these new characters are going to be. But if we continue with this, I think even more answers will be apparent to the players and to the characters as we continue, because some of the questions weren't always related just to those story background elements for the characters. They were really campaign world specific, and legends and myths within a campaign need to be developed and released over time to the players. So this will give that opportunity. Thanks again for joining me, and stick with us as we continue and wrap up this campaign.